Chapter 29. All aboard! The hills of Dorchester hummed with the many voices of the joyous men and boys who had worked so hard to defend them. Matt, Tony, Hooter, and Q hopped a ride on a wagon with two of Thomas's men. By sundown they were back at Sutton's Mill. But tired as they were, they couldn't stop talking about General Washington's army and their amazing feat. They'd beaten the British without a bloody battle. The boys were now free to leave the mill, but the rebels warned that the city was still filled with redcoats and that it was too dangerous for travel. "You are better off waiting here a few days until Hal and his troops have left Boston for good," one of them said with a weary smile. "We'll be back then to let you know when all is clear." The men gave them some hardtack oat cakes and a jug of cider. They also shot 2 rabbits before they left and cooked them over the fire. Hooter couldn't bear the thought of eating the Easter bunny, but the others in their starvation succumbed to the rich, tasty aroma of the cooked meat. Once the men had gone, the boys set about surviving on their own. Matt and Hooter gathered wood, while Tony collected snow to melt for water. Q hunted for birch bark to make tea. "It's full of vitamin C," he announced. "So now you're an expert on birch bark tea?" Tony asked. "If you'd been paying attention, it was part of my oral report last month on American Indians surviving on the land," Q said smugly. "Too bad you didn't do a report on making pizza on the land," Hooter quipped. Together, the boys were able to keep the fire going and stay warm. But each day that passed, Matt grew more and more worried. What if the rebels didn't come back for them? What would they do when the wood and food ran out? By the end of the week, despair had set in. When they had finally given up hoping for even a smallest ray of light, the mill door swung open. A patriot in an oilskin coat and hat hurried inside from the pouring rain. "Well, lads," he exclaimed, shaking the water from his hat, "you can go now. The patrols have quit their posts, and Hal is gathering his troops to leave the city." "But what happened to the Loyalists?" Matt asked, thinking of the Hewsons. "They are running with their tails between their legs, and they can't run fast enough." The man grinned. "The roads are already crowded with their wagons and carts heading for the harbor. Hal has promised not to burn the city down if we hold back and let them leave in peace. You never saw so many white-faced, white-wigged cowards in all your life. Good riddance, eh?" Where was Thomas? And where was his sister and her family, Matt wondered. How would they survive in a city that was about to be overtaken by their enemies? "The patrols have quit their posts, and the roads are open," the man continued. "I have a horse and a wagon waiting outside, and we'll be going into the city if you are looking for a ride." "Thanks," Matt tried to explain. "We came here by boat, but we lost it." But the man shook his head. "It's most likely stolen. People are lining up to pay a king's ransom for a seat on any vessel now. If I were you, I'd forget about your boat and look for a good larder to raid instead. There will be plenty of empty houses and food left for the taking, once the Tories flee." The boys piled into the wagon, which bumped and rattled over the deep-rutted road into Boston. Matt's eyes darted from one building to the next, and to all the dark spaces in between, anxious to catch any sight of the long-lost girls. The horses slowed as they neared the center of the large city. There the road was choked with carriages, carts, and wagons. Families on foot, their backs laden with bundles and baskets, hurried past. Everyone carried something. A small girl held a silver candlestick that was almost as big as she was. An old man clutched a bird cage in one hand and a footstool in the other. A young boy carried 2 gilded picture frames over each arm. Women wept and wailed as feather beds, blankets, and rugs were thrown out open windows into wagons waiting below. Babies howled, dogs barked, men shouted, and the insistent "Hurry, hurry, hurry" was on everyone's lips. But no matter where he looked, Matt could find no trace of the girls. News that George Washington had taken the Heights and General Howe's troops were packing to leave had spread quickly. The Patriots would soon be back in the city. Loyalists were running for their lives. "Whoa!" the driver called to the horses that bucked and whinnied. The wagon slowed to a stop. "You'd better get out here," he told the boys. Matt, Hooter, Tony, and Q jumped down, and the driver snapped his whip. The wagon rolled slowly away. Matt's throat tightened at the sight of the panicked faces on the people pushing past. Q nervously adjusted his glasses while Tony hung on to Hooter for dear life. "Clear the way! Clear the way! His Majesty's men coming through!" someone shouted. Matt spun around to see a group of red-coated soldiers pulling a large cannon. The crowd parted to let them pass. "That's what we need, more big guns. Let them have it," shouted a man carrying a small boy in his arms. "Has General Howe changed his mind?" another man hollered. "Are you getting into position to fire on those filthy rebels after all?" But a burly British soldier squashed any such hopes. No, sir. We're headed for the harbor, with orders to sink all of our heavy guns into the sea. A ripple of angry words and curses swept through the desperate crowd. We've got to get out of here, Matt told the others as they clung to one another. But the narrow street was so packed with families it was impossible to make any headway against the strong current of bodies pushing them forward. They rounded a bend where they saw white sails set against a blue sky. Long wooden sheds and rope walks flanked the sea-swept piers. Gulls cried overhead, and the breeze carried the sharp smell of tar and fish. They had reached the harbor. Massive sailing ships with 100-foot-tall masts were jammed between wooden boats of every size and shape. The vessels creaked and groaned loudly, swaying in their chains. As the boys were shoved forward, they looked desperately through the water at all the boats. Meanwhile, the defeated Tory families pushed and pleaded to get onto the gangplanks. The air was thick with their panicked cries, but the soldiers kept them back with a constant command. All passengers must wait for their turn to board. Stay calm and wait for your turn. The boys tried desperately to break free, but were swept up in the crushing crowd. Before they knew it, they were trapped on a gangplank. After you 4 boys, no more can come, a soldier commanded as he cut off the line behind them. Oh no, Matt cried. There's no way off. All aboard, shouted a sailor. All aboard. Chapter 30. Pox on the boat. Excuse me, ma'am, Q asked an elderly woman who was squeezed beside them on the ship's main deck. Can you tell us where this ship is going? 'Tis bound for Halifax, lad, the woman answered, and only Providence knows what we shall encounter on those God-forsaken shores. Where's Halifax? Tony whispered. Maybe it's warmer there, Hooter said with a shiver. Exceedingly unlikely, Q said, since Halifax is in Canada, and north of here. Only it's Canada of 1776, Matt said, his stomach tightening into knots. The crowd shifted as the people pressed in closer. There was no escaping the desperate crowd's tight hold. The boys locked arms to keep from getting separated as the crush of people pulled them forward. We've got to get off this ship now, Matt said, but he was distracted by a commotion that broke out just ahead of them. What is it? One of the ship's crew called out. A child says she wants to get off, a woman answered. She's lucky to be on this boat, with or without a brother, someone else said. Matt's ears pricked up at the word brother. He scanned the deck to see where the voices were coming from, but the tightly packed crowd blocked his view. That's when he heard a defiant little voice declare, I want Matt! Katie, Matt shouted, pushing through the mass of bodies. And there, just a few feet ahead of him, was Katie. Emma and Lily were beside her, trying to convince her to stay on the boat. Katie, Matt cried. He ran to her and picked her up in his arms. Oh, Katie, I found you, I found you. Matt, Katie cried, clinging to her brother for dear life. I didn't want to go without you, and now you are here. Matt, Hooter, Lily shrieked. Tony, Q, screamed Emma. Where are you? I can't believe we found you at last. The children jumped up and down, laughing, hooting, and crying as they hugged one another. We were afraid we'd never see you again, Lily sobbed. The children all talked at once, when Mercy, Hope, Faith, and Charity pushed their way toward them. The Houston sisters' pretty faces were now washed in worry, and their rumpled clothes were mismatched layers of dresses and petticoats. Their merry chatter was replaced with sober silence as they clutched their hastily packed bundles. These boys are our friends, Lily explained to the Houston girls. Matt is Katie's brother, and they came with us on the boat, and then we all got separated. But what are you doing on this ship? Matt asked. We came with the Houstons, Emma said, nodding toward the Houston girls. We were staying with their family, and when the soldiers came and told everyone to leave the city, we had nowhere else to go. Houston? Matt asked. The Houstons from Milk Street? Where Thomas Jameson lived? How do you know my uncle? Mercy asked. It's a long story, Matt sighed. He looked sadly at the Houston girls. I'm sorry for everything that happened to your family, but you should know that both your uncles just wanted to make a better country. The rebels are going to change things for the good, even though it doesn't seem that way now. Mercy's dark eyes flashed. Our father is dead, murdered by the mob, and our mother stayed behind to care for my sister and uncle. We may never see them alive again. Is that the change your patriots wished for? Matt took a step back, startled by her words. No, he said. I know your uncles never wanted to hurt your family. They were good men. My father was a good man too, Mercy lashed back. I was with your father when he died, Matt said. He told me to tell you that he wants you to be brave, and to know how much he loves you. There was an awkward silence, which Charity was the first to break. "I want Mama and Papa," she cried. "I don't want to be here with all of these strangers." "Papa wants us to be brave, and so we must," Mercy told her. "Besides, they're not all strangers. Katie, Lily, and Emma are coming with us." "No," Matt corrected her. "Katie and the twins must get off the ship now and come with us." "Matt's right," Emma agreed. "We have to go with them. I'm sorry." The Houston girls looked stricken. "We'll never forget all your family has done for us," Lily said gently, reaching out her pinky as she and Mercy touched thumbs with their secret handshake. "Be safe, dear friends," Mercy whispered. "And I pray one day soon you'll all find your way back home." "You too," whispered Lily. "You too." And as the 7 girls hugged tightly one last time, a bell rang out and a sailor cried, "Last call to leave the port." A hush fell over the noisy crowd as the passengers turned and silently gazed back toward the dock. "What are they looking at?" Matt asked. "Home," the man beside them said with a sad shake of his head. "We are taking a last look at the only place we have ever called home. For no loyalists will be allowed back in the colonies once the rebels take root." "Goodbye, Boston. Goodbye, Mama. Goodbye, dear Papa," the Houston girls said through their tears. "Goodbye, America," people called, their voices cracking with emotion. "How are we going to get off this ship?" asked Q desperately as the bell signaled their departure. "We'll never make it back to the gangplank," Tony said. "There are too many people in the way." Emma looked down at her fingernails and got an idea. She took the bottle of nail polish out of her purse. Without wasting any time, she painted red spots on Katie's face. Then she held Katie in her arms. "Clear the gangplanks," the sailor shouted. Lily went into action. "Help us, please," she shrieked. "Our sister is sick with the pox." "Pox? Pox? Pox? That girl has the pox!" The whisper swept through the crowd. Seized with panic, people fell over one another in their hurry to get away from them. Then, like a miracle, the crowd parted, clearing the way on the gangplank. And in a moment, the 7 children filed quickly and easily off the boat. Once on dry ground, they pushed through the swarms of people and soldiers still hoping to board. But as soon as anyone saw Katie's spotted face, they hurried out of her way. And they continued forward until they finally left the crowds behind and reached an empty stretch of dock. "Now what do we do?" asked Q. "We're free, but we have nowhere to go." "Maybe we should walk along the water," suggested Hooter. No one was paying attention to Katie as they discussed their next move. Katie amused herself by throwing stones into the harbor. She was pretending it was a wishing well, and she wished for their boat each time a stone splashed into the water. It was then that she saw a misty blue cloud rising from off the water. "Matt!" she shouted. "Look!" "Not now, Katie. We're busy," Matt shushed her without even turning around. "But the boat," Katie insisted. "We have to get into it." "We just got off the boat," said Emma. "Not the big boat," Katie said. "Our little boat." And everyone turned to find the old blue rowboat rocking ever so gently before them. Silence fell over the 7 children, their eyes glazed and trance-like, their expressions frozen, as they filed into the wooden craft. The blue mist rose up around them, and the boat shuddered and shook. No one moved a muscle as the old boat spun around and around and around, until it spun beyond time and space. Then all was black.